Greetings and salutations. We're back. All the soldiers knew what was happening, but tactical decisions were entirely up to the Toon leaders. Even with Ender's instructions, they were only 10 seconds late getting through the gate. Rabbit Army was already doing some elaborate dance down at the end of the room. In all the other armies Ender had fought in, he would have been worrying right now about making sure he and his Toon were in the proper place in their own formation. Instead, he and all his men were only thinking of ways to slip around past the formation, control the stars in the corners of the room, and then break the enemy formation into meaningless chunks that didn't know what they were doing. Even with less than 4 weeks together, the way they fought already seemed like the only intelligent way, the only possible way. Ender was almost surprised the Rabbit Army didn't know already that they were hopelessly out of date. C-Toon slipped along the wall, coasting with their bent knees facing the enemy. Crazy Tom, the leader of C-Toon, had apparently ordered his men to flash their own legs already. It was a pretty good idea in this dim light, since the lighted flash suits went dark whenever they were frozen. It made them less easily visible. Ender would commend him for that. Rabbit Army was able to drive back C-Toon's attack, but not until Crazy Tom and his boys had carved them up, freezing a dozen rabbits before retreating to the safety of a star. But it was a star behind the rabbit formation, which meant they were going to be easy pickings now. Hanzu, commonly called Hot Soup, was the leader of D-Toon. He slipped along the lip of the star to where Ender knelt. How about flipping off the north wall and kneeling on their faces? Do it, Ender said, and I'll take B south to get behind them. Then he shouted, A&E, slow on the walls. He slid footward along the star, hooked his feet on the lip, and flipped himself up to the top wall, then rebounded down to E-Toon's star. In a moment, he was leading them down against the south wall. They rebounded in near perfect unison and came up behind the two stars that Karn Karby's soldiers were defending. It was like cutting butter with a hot knife. Rabbit Army was gone. Just a little cleanup left to do. Ender broke his Toons into half-Toons to scour the corners for any enemy soldiers who were whole or merely damaged. In 3 minutes, his Toon leaders reported the room clean. Only one of Ender's boys was completely frozen, one of C-Toon, which had borne the brunt of the assault, and only 5 were disabled. Most were damaged, but those were leg shots, and many of them self-inflicted. All in all, it had gone even better than Ender had expected. Ender and his Toon leaders do the honors at the gate, 4 helmets at the corner, and Crazy Tom to pass through the gate. Most commanders took whoever was alive to pass the gate. Ender could have picked practically anyone. A good battle. The lights went full, and Major Anderson himself came through the teacher gate at the south end of the battle room. He looked very solemn as he offered Ender the teacher hook that was virtually given to the victor in the game. Ender used it to thaw his own army's flash suits, of course, and he reassembled them in Toons before thawing the enemy. Crisp military appearance. That's what he wanted when Karby and Rabbit Army got their bodies under control again. They may curse us and lie about us, but they'll remember that we destroyed them, and no matter what they say, other soldiers and other commanders will see it in their eyes, in those rabbit eyes. They'll see us in neat formation, victorious and almost undamaged in our first battle. Dragon Army isn't going to be an obscure name for long. Karn Karby came to Ender's as soon as he was unfrozen. He was a 12-year-old boy who had apparently made commander only in his last year at the school, so he wasn't cocky like the ones who made it at 11. I will remember this, thought Ender, when I am defeated, to keep dignity and to give honor where it's due, so that defeat is not disgrace. And I hope I don't have to do it often. Anderson dismissed Dragon Army last, after Rabbit Army had straggled through the door that Ender boys had come through. Then Ender led his army through the enemy's door. The light along the bottom of the door reminded them of which way it was down once they got back to gravity. They all landed lightly on their feet, running. They assembled in the corridor. It's 07:15, Ender said. And that means you have 15 minutes for breakfast before I see you all in the battle room for morning practice. He could hear them silently say, "Come on, we won, let's celebrate." All right, Ender answered. You may. And you have your commander's permission to throw food at each other during breakfast. They laughed, they cheered, and then he dismissed them and sent them jogging onto the barracks. He caught his Toon leaders on the way out and told them that they wouldn't expect anyone to come to practice till 7:45, and that practice would be over early so the boys could shower. Half an hour for breakfast and no shower right after a battle. It was still stingy, but it would look lenient compared to 15 minutes, and Ender liked having the announcement of an extra 15 minutes come from the Toon leaders. Let the boys learn that leniency comes from their Toon leaders, and hardness from the commander. It would bind them better than the small, tight knots of this fabric. Ender ate no breakfast. He wasn't hungry. Instead, he went to the bathroom and showered, putting his flash suit in the cleaner so it would be ready when he dried off. He washed himself twice and let the water run over him. It would all be recycled. Let everyone drink some of my sweat today. They'd given him an untrained army, and he had won. And not just nip and tuck either. He had won with only 6 frozen or disabled. Let's see how long other commanders keep using their formations now that they've seen what a flexible strategy can do. He was floating in the middle of the battle room when his soldiers began to arrive. No one spoke to him, of course. He would speak, they knew, when he was ready, and not before. When all were there, Ender hooked himself near them and looked at them one by one. Good first battle, he said, which was excuse enough for a cheer, an attempt to start a chant of dragon, dragon, which he quickly stopped. Dragon Army did all right against the rapids, but the enemy isn't always going to be that bad. If they had a good army, Seatoon, your approach was too slow. They would have had you from the flanks before you got into good position. You should have split and angled in from 2 directions so they couldn't flank you. A and E, your aim was wretched. The tallies show that you averaged only 1 hit for every 2 soldiers. That means most of the hits were made by attacking soldiers close in. That can't go on. A competent enemy would cut up the assault forces unless they have much better cover from the soldiers at a distance. I want every toon to work on distance marksmanship at moving and unmoving targets. Have toons make turns being targets. I'll thaw the flash shoots every 3 minutes. Now move. Will we have any stars to work with? Asked Hot Soup to study our aim. I don't want you to get used to having something to steady your aim. If your aim isn't steady, freeze your elbows. Now move. The toon leaders quickly got things going, and Ender moved from group to group to make suggestions and help soldiers who are having particular trouble. The soldiers knew by now that Ender could be brutal in the way he talked to group, but he worked with an individual. He was always patient, explaining as often as necessary, making suggestions quietly, listening to questions and problems and explanations. But he never laughed when they tried to banter with him, and they soon stopped trying. He was commander every moment they were together. He never had to remind them of it. He simply was. They worked all day with the taste of victory in their mouths, and they cheered again when they broke half an hour early for lunch. Ender held the toon leaders until the regular lunch hour to talk about tactics they had used and evaluate the work of their individual soldiers. Then he went to his own room and methodically changed into his uniform for lunch. He would enter the commander's mess about 10 minutes late, exactly the timing that he wanted. Since this was his first victory, he had never seen the inside of commander's mess hall, and he had no idea what new commanders were expected to do. But he did know that he wanted to enter last today when the scores of morning battles were already posted. Dragon Army will not be an obscure name now. There was no great stir when he came in, but some of them noticed how small he was and saw dragons on the sleeves of the uniform. They stared at him openly, and by the time he got his food and sat at a table, the room was silent. Ender began to eat slowly and carefully, pretending not to notice that he was the center of attention. Gradually conversation and noise started up again, and Ender could relax enough to look around. One entire wall of the room was a scoreboard. Soldiers were kept aware of an army's overall record for the past 2 years. And here, however, records were kept for each commander. A new commander couldn't inherit a good standing from his predecessor. He was ranked according to what he had done. Ender had the best ranking, a perfect 1-loss record. Of course, but in the other categories, he was far ahead. Average soldiers disabled, average enemy disabled, average time elapsed before victory. In every category, he was ranked first. When he was nearly through eating, someone came up behind him and touched his shoulder. Mind if I sit? Ender didn't have to turn around to know it was Dink Meeker. Oh, Dink, said Ender. You gold-plated fart, said Dink cheerfully. We're all trying to decide whether your score's up there a miracle or a mistake. Habit, said Ender. One victory is not a habit, Dink said. Don't get cocky. When you're new, they seed you against weak commanders. Karn Carvey isn't exactly on the bottom of the rankings. It was true. Karn Carvey was just about in the middle. He's okay, Dink said, considering that he only just started. So some promise. You don't show promise. You show threat. Threat to what? Do they feed you less if I win? I thought you told me this was all a stupid game and none of it mattered. Dink didn't like having his words thrown back at him. Not under these circumstances. You were the one who got me playing along with them. But I'm not playing games with you, Ender. You won't beat me. Probably not, Ender said. I taught you, Dink said. Everything I know, said Ender. I'm just playing it by ear right now. Congratulations, said Dink.
Hey, we're going to try and do dinner earlier, like 5:30 or so, because Kim is coming over later. Like it's 6:30, so we're going to try and do dinner.
It's good to know I have a friend here, but Ender wasn't sure Dink was his friend anymore. Neither was Dink. After a few empty sentences, Dink went back to his table. Ender looked around when he was through with his meal. There were quite a few small conversations going on. Ender spotted Bonso, who was now one of the oldest commanders. Rose the Nose had graduated. Petra was with a group in a far corner, and she didn't look at him once. Since most of the others stole glances at him from time to time, including the ones Petra was talking with, Ender was pretty sure she was deliberately avoiding his glance. That's the problem with winning right from the start, thought Ender. You lose friends. Give them a few weeks to get used to it. By the time I have my next battle, things will have calmed down in here. Karn Karby made a point of coming to greet Ender before the lunch period ended. It was again a gracious gesture, and unlike Dink, Karby did not seem weary. Right now, I'm in disgrace, he said frankly. They won't believe me when I tell them you did things that nobody's ever seen before. So I hope you beat the snot out of the next army you fight, as a favor to me. As a favor to you, Ender said, and thanks for talking to me. I think they're treating you pretty badly. Usually new commanders are cheated when they first join the mess, but then usually a new commander has had a few defeats under his belt before he makes it in here. I only got in here a month ago, and if anyone deserves a cheer, it's you. But that's life. Make them eat dust. I'll try. Karn Karby left, and Ender mentally added him to his private list of people who also qualified as human beings. That night, Ender slept better than he had in a long time. Slept so well, in fact, that he didn't wake up until the lights came on. He woke up feeling good, jogged on out to take a shower, and did not notice the piece of paper on his floor until he came back and started dressing in his uniform. He only saw the paper because it moved in the wind as he snapped out of the uniform to put it on. He picked up the paper and read it. Petra Arcanian, Phoenix Army, 0700. It was his old army, the one he had left less than 4 weeks before, and he knew their formations backward and forward. Partly because of Ender's influence, they were the most flexible armies, responding relatively quickly to new situations. Phoenix Army would be the best able to cope with Ender's fluid, unpatterned attack. The teachers were determined to make life interesting for him. 0700, said the paper, and it's already 0630. Some of his boys might be heading for breakfast. Ender tossed his uniform aside, grabbed his flash suit, and in a moment stood in the doorway of his army's barracks. Gentlemen, I hope you learned something yesterday, because today we're doing it again. It took a moment for them to realize that he meant a battle, not a practice. It had to be a mistake, they said. Nobody had battles 2 days in a row. He handed the paper to Fly Molo, the leader of Achen, who immediately shouted, "Flash suits!" and everyone started changing clothes. "Why didn't you tell us earlier?" demanded Hot Soup. Hot had a way of asking questions that nobody else dare ask. "I thought you needed the shower," Ender said. "Yesterday, Rabbit Army claimed we only won because the stink knocked them out. The soldiers who heard him laughed. Didn't find the paper till you got back from the showers, right?" Ender looked for the source of the voice. It was Bean, already in his flash suit, looking excellent. Time to repay old humiliations. Is that it, Bean? Of course, Ender said contemptuously. I'm not as close to the floor as you are. More laughter. Bean flushed with anger. It's plain we can't count on the old way of doing things, Ender said. So you'd better plan on battles any time, and often. I can't pretend I like the way they're screwing around with us, but I do like one thing, that I've got an army that can handle it. After that, if he had asked them to follow him to the moon without spacesuits, they would have done it. Petra was not Karn Karby. She had more flexible patterns and responded much more quickly to Ender's darting, improvised, unpredictable attack. As a result, Ender had 3 boys flash and 9 disable at the end of the battle. Petra was not gracious about bowing over his hand at the end either. The anger in her eyes seemed to say, "I was your friend and you humiliate me like this." Ender pretended not to notice her fury. He figured that after a few more battles, she'd realize in fact she had scored more hits against him than he had expected ever would again. And he was still learning from her. In practice today, he would teach his toon leaders how to counter the tricks Petra had played on them. Soon they would be friends again, he hoped. Let's see. At the end of the week, Dragon Army had fought 7 battles in 7 days. The score stood 7 wins and 0 losses. Ender had never had more losses than in the battle with Phoenix Army. In the 2 battles he suffered not one soldier frozen or disabled. No one believed anymore that it was a fluke that put him first in the standings. He'd beaten top armies by unheard of margins. It was no longer possible for the other commanders to ignore him. A few of them sat with him at every meal, carefully trying to learn from him how he had defeated his most recent opponents. He told them freely, confident that few of them would know how to train their soldiers and their toon leaders to duplicate what his could do. And while Ender talked with a few commanders, much larger groups gathered around the opponents Ender had defeated, trying to find out how Ender might be beaten. There were many, too, who hated him for being young, for being excellent, for having made their victories look paltry and weak. Ender saw it first in their faces when he passed them in the corridors. Then he began to notice that some boys would get up in a group and move to another table if he sat near them in the commander's mess. And there began to be elbows that accidentally jostled in the game room, feet that got untangled with his when he walked out and into the gym, spittle and wads of wet paper that struck him from behind as he jogged through the corridors. They couldn't beat him in the battle room and knew it, so instead they would just attack him where it was safe, where he could not be, where he was not a giant but just a little boy. Ender despised them, but secretly, so secretly, that he didn't even have to know it himself. He feared them. It was just such little torments that Peter had always used, and Ender was beginning to feel far too much at home. Okay, I love you, Kenzie. Bye-bye.